September 1939, Montreal, Quebec. Victory Aircraft Plant No. 2. The air smells of machine oil and wet concrete. Outside, the first autumn rains darken the cobblestones. Inside, beneath newly installed arc lamps, a factory floor stretches nearly 300 meters in length. It is empty, silent, waiting. Britain has just declared war on Germany. Canada will follow within the week. The call has already gone out across the Dominion. Aircraft, thousands of them, needed immediately. Hurricanes, Lancasters, Mosquitoes, training planes by the hundreds. The Royal Air Force is bleeding machines faster than British factories can replace them. The Commonwealth Air Training Plan is being drafted in emergency meetings in Ottawa. Canada must build an air force from nothing. But there is a problem no one has yet spoken aloud. The men are leaving. Volunteers flood recruitment stations in Toronto, Winnipeg, Halifax. Within months, the factories will lose their welders, their machinists, their riveters. The assembly lines will stand empty while the Luftwaffe owns the skies over Europe. In a narrow office overlooking the factory floor, a production manager named Harold Emerson stares at a workforce projection chart. The numbers are impossible. To meet the British contract for Avro Ansons alone, Victory Aircraft will need 1,200 workers by January 1940. Experienced workers, he has perhaps 200 men, and half of them have already applied for enlistment. Emerson sets down his pencil. He looks out at the empty assembly jigs, the skeletal frames where wings will be built. Then he picks up the telephone and makes a call that will alter the social fabric of Canada. He asks the government to allow women into the plants. The response is immediate and dismissive. Women cannot handle industrial labor. They lack the physical strength. They will disrupt morale. They are needed at home. The objections pile up like sandbags, but the mathematics of war are unforgiving. There are no other workers. There is no other choice. By November 1939, the first advertisements appear in Montreal newspapers. Wanted women for aircraft assembly work. No experience necessary. Training provided. The pay is 60 cents an hour, nearly double what a seamstress earns, half what a male machinist makes. The women come. They come from textile mills and department store counters. They come from rural townships where the only jobs are seasonal and scarce. Some are widows. Some are mothers whose sons have already shipped overseas. Many are young, 18 or 19, living at home, expected to marry and disappear into domesticity. They arrive at the factory gates in wool coats and heeled shoes, carrying lunch pails, uncertain and afraid. The training program is 6 weeks long. The instructors are older men, some of them veterans of the last war, skeptical and blunt. They teach the women to read blueprints, to operate pneumatic drills, to drive rivets in perfect rows. The noise is overwhelming. The drills scream. The metal sheets clang against concrete. The women wear cotton coveralls and leather gloves. Their hair is pinned under cloth caps. They learn to handle tools that weigh more than their younger siblings. One of them is a woman named Alice Derichet. She is 22 years old, born in a logging town north of Quebec City. Her father died in a mill accident when she was 16. Her mother works as a laundress. Alice had been employed at a garment factory in Montreal, sewing linings into men's coats for 35 cents an hour. She saw the advertisement in La Presse. She did not tell her mother she was applying. On her first day, Alice is assigned to the fuselage assembly line. The Avro Anson is a twin-engine reconnaissance aircraft, fabric-covered, wood-framed, outdated even as it rolls off the line. But it is needed desperately for training pilots under the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan. Every Anson built in Canada means one more crew trained to fight. Alice's job is to install control cable fittings inside the fuselage. The space is tight, barely wide enough for her shoulders. She must crouch inside the aluminum frame, reach overhead, and bolt the fittings into place using a ratchet wrench. Her hands blister within the first hour. By the end of the shift, her knuckles are bleeding through the gloves. She does not complain. Neither do the other women. Complaining means being sent home. Complaining means admitting the men were right. The supervisors watch them constantly, waiting for mistakes. Some are supportive, offering corrections and encouragement. Others are resentful, convinced that women will ruin the work, that the aircraft will fall apart in the sky because a rivet was placed by inexperienced hands. The women work in silence, heads down, proving themselves one bolt at a time. By February 1940, Victory Aircraft has 370 women on the floor. The first Avro Anson rolls out of the plant on schedule. It is inspected by Royal Canadian Air Force engineers. Every joint is checked, every control surface tested. The aircraft passes without defect. The women are given no recognition, no ceremony. They return to their stations. There are 999 more Ansons to build. The work is relentless. Shifts run 10 hours. 6 days a week, the factory is unheated in winter, stifling in summer. The women develop calluses, muscle endurance. They learn to spot a misaligned frame from across the room. They learn the rhythm of the rivet gun, the pressure needed to seal aluminum without cracking it. They become fast, faster than the men expected, faster than the production schedules anticipated. In the spring of 1940, the war turns catastrophic. Norway falls, Denmark falls. The Wehrmacht smashes through the Low Countries and encircles the British Expeditionary Force at Dunkirk. France collapses in 6 weeks. Britain stands alone. The demand for aircraft becomes frantic. The contracts double, then triple. Canada must produce not only trainers but bombers, fighters, transport planes. New factories open in Toronto, Winnipeg, Vancouver. Canadian Vickers begins building Catalina flying boats. De Havilland Canada assembles Mosquito bombers. Thousands of women flood into the plants. They are farmers' daughters and school teachers and bank clerks. They are Indigenous women from reserves across Ontario and Quebec. They are immigrants who left Europe just before the war. They arrive in wave after wave, filling the emptied factories, keeping the production lines alive. Alice Desrochers is promoted to lead riveter. She oversees a team of 6 women on the wing assembly line. The wings of the Anson are covered in fabric, but the internal structure is aluminum, requiring thousands of rivets driven in precise patterns. A single misplaced rivet can cause catastrophic failure in flight. Alice checks every line, every seam. She works with a concentration that borders on obsession. She knows that somewhere over the North Atlantic or the English Channel, a pilot she will never meet is trusting her work with his life. One evening in late May, a supervisor approaches her station. He carries a photograph, grainy and folded. It shows the wreckage of an Anson training aircraft crashed in a field outside Trenton, Ontario. 2 student pilots killed. The investigation revealed a structural failure in the wing root. Poor riveting. The supervisor does not say whose shift it was. He does not need to. He pins the photograph to the bulletin board near the time clock. The message is clear. Alice stares at the photograph for a long time. Then she returns to her station and works through the night, rechecking every rivet her team has driven that week. She finds 3 that are slightly off-angle. She drills them out and replaces them. She logs the corrections in the quality report. She does not sleep. The other women see the photograph. They do not speak of it. But the pace on the floor changes. The laughter stops. The chatter fades. Every woman understands that her hands are life or death. The work becomes sacred. By the summer of 1940, Canada is producing 15 Avro Ansons per week. The number climbs to 20, then 25. The women are no longer an experiment. They are the workforce. The men who remain are reassigned to heavy machining and engine installation, tasks requiring upper body strength the women genuinely lack. But the assembly, the wiring, the fabric covering, the painting, these belong to the women now. The government notices, the propaganda begins. Posters appear across the country showing women in coveralls, holding rivet guns, smiling under slogans like, "She's doing her bit," and "Women in War Work." Newsreels film the assembly lines, zooming in on hands and faces, narrated with pride and astonishment. The women are celebrated in public and underpaid in private. They are heroes and cheap labor. They are indispensable and temporary. Alice Desrochers does not see herself in the posters. She sees only the aircraft. Anson after Anson rolling toward the paint shop, then the airfield, then the sky. She wonders if they will be enough, because the war is growing darker. The Blitz begins. London burns. Convoys sink in the North Atlantic. The Soviet Union is invaded. The United States remains neutral. The pressure on Canada intensifies. More planes. Always more planes. And the women keep building. January 1942. Malton, Ontario Victory Aircraft has been redesigned, expanded, transformed. What was once a modest assembly facility now sprawls across 40 acres of industrial land near Toronto. The Canadian government has poured millions into retooling the plant. The mission has changed. No more trainers. Now bombers, the Avro Lancaster, 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, wingspan over 30 meters. Empty weight 20,000 kilograms, designed to carry 4,000 kilograms of bombs deep into occupied Europe, the most effective heavy bomber in the Allied arsenal, and Canada has been contracted to build them. The challenge is immense. The Lancaster is not a simple aircraft. It contains 55,000 individual parts. Its assembly requires precision engineering, complex hydraulics, electrical systems that must function flawlessly at -40 degrees Celsius and 20,000 feet altitude. British factories are struggling to produce 5 Lancasters per week. Canada is expected to match that output within 6 months. The workforce has swelled to over 9,000. Nearly 60% are women. They no longer work only on wings and fuselages. They are now installing engines, wiring electrical panels, assembling bomb bay doors, calibrating instruments. The supervisors have stopped questioning their capability. The numbers speak for themselves. The women are faster, more meticulous, and less prone to errors than many of their male predecessors. Alice Desrochers has been transferred to Malton. She is now a quality inspector, responsible for checking every major structural joint before an aircraft moves to the next assembly stage. She carries a flashlight and a metal probe. She climbs into wheel wells and bomb bays. She inspects welds, rivet patterns, control cable tension. She signs off on airframes that will fly into flak and fire. The responsibility does not weigh on her anymore. It has become reflex. But there is a problem emerging, one that no one anticipated. The pace is unsustainable. The demand from Britain is relentless. Bomber Command is losing aircraft faster than they can be replaced. Every raid over Germany costs a dozen Lancasters or more. The factories must produce faster. Shifts are extended to 12 hours. The 6-day work week becomes 7. Women are collapsing at their stations from exhaustion. Injuries increase. A riveter loses 2 fingers when her hand slips under a pneumatic press. A welder suffers 3rd-degree burns when her glove catches fire. The accidents are logged, the women replaced. The line kept moving. Alice sees it happening. She sees women working through fevers, through injuries, through grief. One of her inspectors, a woman named Margaret, learns that her husband has been killed in action in North Africa. She receives the telegram during her lunch break. She reads it, folds it into her pocket, and returns to the floor. She works her full shift. She doesn't cry until she is on the streetcar home. The factories are not just building aircraft, they are absorbing the entire emotional weight of the war. In March 1942, a delegation from the British Ministry of Aircraft Production arrives at Malton. They are skeptical. They have heard reports of Canadian efficiency, but they do not believe a factory staffed largely by women can match British output. They tour the assembly line, notebooks in hand, observing every station. They watch the women work. They examine the completed Lancasters waiting on the tarmac. The lead inspector is a man named Sir Frederick Handley Page, a pioneering aircraft designer. He walks the length of a finished Lancaster, running his hand along the fuselage seams, checking the alignment of the wings. He climbs inside, inspects the cockpit, the bomb aimer's station, the rear gun turret. He says nothing. His face is unreadable. Then he turns to the plant manager and speaks. "This is the finest assembly work I have seen in any factory, British or otherwise. How many of these can you produce per month?" The manager hesitates, then answers, 30. By the end of the year, possibly 40. Sir Frederick doesn't smile, but something shifts in his expression. He shakes the manager's hand. Then he does something no one expects. He walks back onto the factory floor and approaches the nearest assembly team, 5 women ranging in age from 19 to 47. They are riveting the underside of a wing section, working in synchronized rhythm. He waits until they pause, then extends his hand to the eldest, a woman named Irene. "Thank you," he says simply. "You are saving lives." Irene does not know how to respond. She nods. Sir Frederick shakes each woman's hand, then leaves. The women return to their work, but something has changed. They have been seen. By June 1942, Victory Aircraft is producing 28 Lancasters per month. The number climbs to 32 in July. The Canadian factories are now outproducing Germany's bomber plants. Luftwaffe production has been crippled by Allied bombing raids and resource shortages. German factories are struggling to build 15 heavy bombers per month. Canada alone is building more than twice that, but the cost is mounting. The factories run 24 hours a day, 3 shifts rotating weekly. Women work nights, then days, then nights again, their circadian rhythms shattered. They sleep 4 or 5 hours if they are lucky. They eat meals standing up. They stop menstruating from stress and malnutrition. They develop chronic back pain, carpal tunnel syndrome, respiratory infections from metal dust and paint fumes. The factories have medical stations now staffed by nurses who dispense aspirin and bandages and send the women back to the line. Alice begins to notice patterns. Certain women disappear. They do not quit. They are simply gone one day, their stations filled by someone new. She asks a supervisor what happened. He shrugs. Some go home, some go to other jobs. Some just stop showing up. But Alice suspects the truth is darker. The women are breaking. Not all of them. Most endure. But some cannot. The physical toll, the emotional exhaustion, the relentless grind, it becomes too much. They leave quietly, without ceremony, their contributions unrecorded. Alice wonders how long she can last. Then, in August 1942, something shifts. The government announces a new initiative: on-site childcare, factory cafeterias with subsidized meals, medical clinics with real doctors, not just nurses, transportation assistants. The changes are not altruistic. They are pragmatic. The factories cannot afford to lose more women. Productivity is everything. If the women need support to keep working, the government will provide it. It is not enough, but it helps. Alice sees women bringing their children to work now, dropping them at the factory daycare before their shift. She sees them eating hot meals in the cafeteria instead of cold sandwiches from home. She sees the medical clinic treating infections before they become serious, prescribing rest instead of just aspirin. The women endure. By December 1942, Canada has produced 430 Lancasters. The aircraft are flown to Britain, assembled into squadrons, and sent into combat. They bomb Hamburg, Essen, Berlin. They sink U-boats in the Bay of Biscay. They drop agents into occupied France. Every mission is a gamble. Every aircraft lost is a crew killed or captured. But the bombers keep coming, an unending stream from Canadian factories flown by Canadian, British, Australian, and New Zealand crews. Alice inspects her 500th Lancaster in January 1943. She stands beneath the bomber's nose, looking up at the perspex canopy, the gun turrets, the massive wings. She thinks about the crew that will fly it. She does not know their names. She will never meet them. But she knows they are trusting her work, the work of thousands of women whose names will never appear in any official history. She signs the inspection sheet. The Lancaster is cleared for flight. It rolls out of the hangar and onto the airfield, where a ferry crew will fly it to Halifax, then across the Atlantic. Alice watches it go, then she returns to the line. There are 499 more to build. Because the war is not over, the tide is turning, but slowly. The factories must keep producing. The women must keep working. There is no other way, and they do. May 1945, Malton, Ontario. The war in Europe is over. Germany has surrendered. The newsreels show crowds in Trafalgar Square, Times Square, Parliament Hill. Soldiers kissing strangers, church bells ringing. The world exhales. Inside Victory aircraft, the assembly line stops. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually, over days and weeks, the pace slows. Contracts are cancelled, orders are reduced. The Lancaster production line, which peaked at 43 aircraft per month in March 1945, begins to wind down. The women are told nothing officially, but they understand. The war is over. They are no longer needed. Alice Desrochers walks the empty sections of the factory floor on a warm afternoon in June. The silence is unsettling. For 5 years, this place has roared with noise, vibrated with urgency. Now it echoes. Machinery sits idle. Assembly jigs stand empty. The overhead cranes are motionless. She passes a bulletin board near the time clock. Someone has pinned a newspaper clipping to it. The headline reads, "Canadian women to return home as men reclaim factory jobs." Beneath it, a photograph shows a woman in coveralls handing a wrench to a man in uniform. The caption calls it a grateful transition. Alice tears the clipping down. She crumples it and drops it into a waste bin. By July 1945, over 4,000 women have been laid off from Victory aircraft. They are given 2 weeks' notice and a small severance payment. There are no ceremonies, No acknowledgments of their service. The government propaganda that once celebrated them as heroes now pivots seamlessly to celebrating their return to traditional roles. Magazines publish articles on how to be a good housewife after factory work. Radio programs offer advice on readjusting to domestic life. The women leave quietly. Some cry. Some are relieved. Most are simply exhausted. Alice is offered a position in the quality control department at reduced hours and reduced pay. She considers it for a week, then declines. She has worked 6 years without a real break. She has inspected over 2,000 aircraft. She has saved money, more than she ever imagined having. She decides to go home. She returns to Quebec, to the small town where her mother still works as a laundress. Her mother is older now, grayer, but her hands are still strong. She embraces Alice at the train station and does not ask questions. They walk home together in silence. Alice does not speak much about the factories. When neighbors ask, she says she worked in Montreal. She does not mention the Lancasters, the rivets, the night shifts. She does not mention the women who collapsed, the accidents, the photograph of the crashed Anson. She doesn't mention Sir Frederick Handley Page shaking her hand. It feels distant now, like something that happened to someone else. But at night she dreams of aluminum and rivet guns. Across Canada the story repeats. Thousands of women return to lives that no longer fit. They have earned wages, made decisions, led teams. They have built machines of war with their own hands. They have proven themselves capable of anything, and now they are expected to forget. Some do forget, or pretend to. They marry, raise children, keep house. They do not speak of the factories, but others cannot forget. They have tasted independence, competence, purpose. They resist the return to invisibility. Some go back to school. Some start businesses. Some fight for the right to remain in industrial work, though the unions and the government push back hard. A few succeed. Most do not. The official history of Canadian war production credits the factories, the engineers, the government contracts. It mentions the women in passing, if at all. The photographs in archives show assembly lines but rarely name the workers. The records list production numbers, not the hands that built them, but the numbers tell a story the official histories omit. Between 1939 and 1945, Canada produced over 16,000 military aircraft. Ansons, Hurricanes, Lancasters, Mosquitoes, Catalinas, Dakotas. Canadian factories built more aircraft per capita than any other Allied nation. The production rate exceeded Germany's from 1942 onward. By 1944, Canadian Lancasters were flying in every major bomber command raid over Europe. They carried the war to the enemy when no other option existed, and women built most of them. At the peak of production in 1944, women made up 70% of the workforce in Canadian aircraft factories. They were welders, electricians, inspectors, machinists. They were 18 years old and 55. They were mothers and daughters and widows. They worked through exhaustion, injury, grief. They worked because they were needed, because they were capable, because they chose to. The aircraft they built flew over 50,000 combat missions. They dropped over 600,000 tons of bombs. They sank hundreds of U-boats and supply ships. They transported troops, supplies, and wounded soldiers. They trained tens of thousands of pilots and crew. They changed the course of the war. And then they were erased. Not entirely. Not forever. But for decades, their contributions were minimized, romanticized, or ignored. The factories became stories about industrial capacity and government planning, not about the human hands that did the work. The women became footnotes, symbols, propaganda images. They were not treated as workers, as skilled laborers, as essential contributors. They were treated as temporary fill-ins, grateful to step aside when the men returned. Alice Desrochers lives quietly for the rest of her life. She never marries. She works as a bookkeeper for a lumber company. She saves money, buys a small house. She watches the world change slowly, unevenly. She sees the feminist movements of the 1960s and 1970s with quiet recognition. She sees women fighting for rights she once took for granted in the factories. Equal pay, workplace safety, respect. In 1982, a local historian interviews her for a project on wartime Quebec. He asks about her work during the war. She speaks carefully, precisely. She describes the assembly process, the specifications of the Anson and the Lancaster, the inspection protocols. She does not dramatize, she does not claim heroism, she simply states facts. The historian asks if she is proud of her work. Alice pauses, then nods. Yes, we did what was necessary, we did it well. The interview is recorded, transcribed, filed in a provincial archive. It is one of hundreds of such interviews, scattered across Canada, most never published, many lost. The women spoke when asked, but they were rarely asked. Alice dies in 1996 at the age of 79. Her obituary mentions that she worked in wartime manufacturing. It does not mention the Lancasters, it does not mention the 2,000 aircraft she inspected, it does not mention that her hands helped build the machines that ended the war. But the aircraft remember. In museums across Canada and Britain, restored Lancasters sit in silent testimony. Their aluminum skin riveted in perfect rows, their control cables tensioned precisely, their frames welded by hands that were told they were not strong enough. Every joint, every seam, every bolt placed by workers whose names are not recorded, whose faces are not remembered, whose contributions were taken for granted. The women who built these aircraft did not expect recognition. They did not demand monuments or medals. They worked because the war required it, because their country needed them, because they could. They proved that capability has no gender, that skill is learned, that determination can overcome any prejudice. They built 10,000 bombers. They outproduced the enemy. They helped win the war. And then they went home. The legacy they left is not in statues or textbooks. It is in the quiet knowledge that when the world needed them most, they rose. They worked. They endured. They succeeded. And though history tried to forget them, the aircraft remain, silent proof of what women can accomplish when given the chance. The sky remembers what the earth forgot.